administration in order. Once they satisfy that phase one of the process, it then moves to the evaluation committee. The evaluation committee now is guided by criteria, and the evaluation committee will tick off or make a comment with reference to each criterion and the bidders as they satisfy it. So the next process requires the evaluation committee to recommend to NPTAB, the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board, how is it that these bidders came in. The lowest, most responsive is Tom Jones. The second lowest responsive is this person. And that is done based on them satisfying the criteria and against or juxtaposing it with their bid figure. So if myself satisfy the entire criteria and my price is $100 and Mr. Aubrey Norton satisfied the criteria and his bid price is $120, I become the lowest, most responsive. Mr. Norton becomes the second lowest responsive. But the responsiveness has to do with you satisfying the entire criteria. And then the lowest corresponds with your figure. And that is how that recommendation is made to NPTAB. So NPTAB has to tell us, why is it that the third most responsive bidder was given the project at Bellevue Pump Station for the construction of the Bellevue Pump Station? And why is it that the second lowest responsive bidder was given the project at Jimbo Grove Pump Station? And mind you, these are just these 4 pump stations. There are many other projects that were awarded by NPTAB, and it was not awarded to the lowest, most responsive bidder. Our contention has always been that the award must go to the lowest, most responsive bidder. We understand that that does not mean that you have the lowest bid, because responsive means you satisfy the criteria. I want to also say on this very subject matter that we know that there are there are 4 different projects. It's not one project. There are 4 different projects. And that is justified by the fact that the award letter that came out from NPTAB, each one of them have different reference numbers. I call again, with the blessings of the coalition, for an independent investigation with competent personnel on the operations at NPTAB. And this is not isolated there. The call is also made for us to examine the regional procurement and tender administration boards from Region 1 to Region 10. All of these boards are engaged in corrupt practices, and there is need for us to have an investigation. I can say with confidence that the APNU AFC will be tabling amendments to the Procurement Act of 2003 in an effort to fix the system, and we also will be moving a motion calling on the administration, the regime, to recognize that there is need for a commission of inquiry into the operation of the regional procurement and tender administration boards across Guyana, and also the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have an address by Member of Parliament Fitzroy Jordan.
Thank you very much, Nika. Good morning to the viewers. This morning, like many other sectors, there's a crisis in the agriculture sector, particularly in Gaisuku. In 2020, the APNU-AFC coalition left a 5-year, that is for 2020 to 2025, business plan for Gaisuku. That plan had estimated to continue on the path of production at an average of 147 metric tons of sugar annually. That production would have taken place at Albion, Blaemont, and Rosal, and Estate. When we compare the poor performance and operation along with the management of Gaisuku under the PPP with the APNU, we would find that the PPP administration failed on the campaign promise to reopen 1, the Skeldon Sugar Estate, 2, the Rosal Sugar Estate, and the East Demerara Estates. This failure is evident despite the Honorable Minister of Agriculture declaring publicly that after 3 years of spending $35 billion, they were able to reopen the Rosal Estate. To date, the Minister of Agriculture and Gaisuku cannot sensibly declare to the public the operation costs against that of the production quantity at this factory. Out of $35 billion being spent on Gaisuku alone for this year, thus far, $17 billion was spent on field and factory operations, according to the CEO for Gaisuku. $1.1 billion was spent on Rosal Estate from January to now. When we look at the production for Gaisuku in particular, the 3 operating estates at present and the one now coming on stream, we find that under the coalition, Gaisuku would have done its best compared to what is happening now under the PPP administration. I just want to run the numbers by years so that people can understand and the public can be in tune with what is happening at Gaisuku. In 2019, there was a budgeted target of 107,203 metric tons of sugar for Gaisuku. That was under the coalition. The actual production was 92,246 metric tons. In 2020, there was no fixed production target, a budgeted target, and we all know COVID and all that arise in 2020. Yet for all, Gaisuku produced 89,000 tons of sugar. In 2021, the budgeted target was 97,420 tons. That was revised by the PPP administration by half year to 70,000 metric tons. The actual production in that year was 58,025 metric tons of sugar. In 2022, we saw the budgeted target reduced or revised again downwards to 66,000 metric tons, with an approximate 47,000 metric tons of sugar being produced in the same year. In 2023, we saw the figures going lower, where Gaisuku budgeted to produce 60,000 metric tons of sugar. And to date, from the first crop, they have managed to produce just over 10,000 tons. When we put this into perspective, we understand that from 2019 to 2020, sugar production declined by 3.5% under the coalition, from 92,000 tons to just about 89,000 tons of sugar. In 2021, sugar production declined by 35%, from 89,000 to 58,000. And this is when the PPP began to take full control of Gaisuku. In 2022, we saw 51% decline from 89 or 92,000 tons in 2019 to 47,000 tons in 2022. Here in 2023, we are yet to have a full year's production, so we cannot declare or determine the actual decline, but we know by far it is way below that of 2022, because in 2022, Gaisuku estimated to produce in the first crop 20,000 tons of sugar, and they managed to produce only 13,000 tons. In 2023 present, they estimated to produce, with the figures being revised downwards again, 16,000 tons. And at the end of the first crop, we saw that they only produced just over 10,000 tons. With the PPPC managing the sugar industry, we saw production decline significantly from 92,246,000 metric tons in 2019 to 47,049 metric tons in 2022, which is a whopping 51% in just over 3 years. In reality, sugar production has declined by over 50% since the PPP took office, while they injected over $35 billion into sugar production. I want to touch on a few defects at the Rosal estate that the Minister of Agriculture commented on just a few weeks ago. The minister mentioned that he acknowledged that there are a few defects at the Rosal estate, but what is important to note is that during the years 2021 and 2022, the minister said to the National Assembly that they have a work plan, and that work plan was one that will see the Rosal estate be reopened and put into production of sugar. At mid-September, the factory, after steam trial and all the other tests, began operation. The harvesting gang began working, and sugar production was supposed to start. To date, in October, we cannot have a positive declaration from the Ministry of Agriculture, more so Gaisuku, saying to us that the Rosal estate is free of defects and that production at that estate is at, let us say, 50 to 60% of its target. There is a target being floated at the Rosal estate of 450 metric tons per week. 2 weeks elapsed and they had to produce 900 metric tons of sugar. All that the minister could have responded to say is that they produced 130 metric tons of sugar, which is far from the truth. The sugar that was produced, which we normally call in the estate jargons magma, is something that after production we would place back into the boilers and then reprocess. But whether or not it is for packaging or for international purposes, that is for commercial sale, it is being declared as a production amount because it has already been processed. And so the minister coming to let the public know that 130 tons of sugar was produced is also embarrassing, because 130 tons of sugar from a budgeted target of 900 metric tons of sugar, which is just about 14% of sugar produced outside of an operational cost, outside of a production cost and field cost, is one where Guyanese must pay keen attention. Because after plugging $35 billion into Gaisuku, which a large sum went to the rehabilitation of these estates that were closed, and mind you, we are not forgetting at this time that failure of Jagdeo at Skeldon, where we spent almost $200 million US. But here they come again in government and begin to plug money into an entity which they cannot manage and effectively gain production from their investments. But outside of the plugging of monies, the plan was supposed to bring to Rosal Estate full production. During our questioning in the National Assembly, the Minister of Agriculture stated that this plan would have seen the boiler house undergoing repairs, several mechanical parts of the factory undergoing repair, the electrical operation room, and many other processing units. To date, these are some of the defects in that factory. The number 2 and number 3 boilers at the factory are leaking at various points. Mechanical failures are many across the factory, in addition to the boilers losing steam very often. And these are things that were supposed to be completed with the monies budgeted to ensure that the factory is put into operation. There are many stoppages in grinding at the point or to the point that now there is a complete temporary shutdown of the Rosal estate. There are major leaks on steam pipes and centrifugal baskets at that estate. Hundreds, or if not hundreds of millions, have already been spent on chips and factory production, feeder wood for the boiler and the juice clarifier. The factory is presently overheating at various points, which is very, very dangerous. Coming to the field and the factory, we understand that the workforce is under tremendous pressure stemming from an inexperienced workforce and shortages of technical and field workers. To put it in a nutshell, what the government has said to us with regards to the reopening of this Rosal, Skeldon, and Demar estates, they have failed tremendously. Because after spending billions of dollars with a plan to reopen the sugar estate, just to promise and to say to a certain section of their supporters that we are going to reopen estates, is a final position now that we see it is just squander and wastage of taxpayers' dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will take questions, of course, by the raise of hand, and you will feature media out. I see the hand of Mr. Bina. Hi, Trina.
Hello, good day everyone. Delina with Territorial News. Mr. Norton, earlier in your presentation, you spoke about the audit issue. You are disciplinary action from Mr. Lukusai, but the opposition believes those responsible will still face penalties. I just wanted some clarity on what are you then suggesting? What would you like to see happen? And on the energy sector, the issue of blackouts and so on, what are your thoughts on the large-scale self-generating businesses being taken off during peak hours?
Now, as it relates to the question of Mr. Gosai, people are elected to govern. These public servants are accountable to the government. This is a sector that Barrett Jackdale micromanages. Even the minister suffers at the hands of micromanagement. Now, you had an audit. This audit revealed 214 million or more overstated. US overstated. You claim that a process occurred. The process brought it down, I think, to 11 million, then to 3 million. And then I think they said it went back to 11 million. As I understand an audit, and I'm no accountant, you have to provide your bills. When you provide the bills, you will say, this is what was spent. And so you will now reconcile. How do you explain that these bills were provided and it comes from 240 to 11, then to 3? Something has to be wrong. But let's assume the public servant made a mistake. Why didn't you, in the first case, indicate that it was a public servant mistake? Why is it you were contending to the contrary? And then suddenly, when you recognize that you're exposed, you throw it at a public servant. When the man in charge is accused of bribery and corruption, it is evident to all who want to think that Mr. Gosai, who I don't know don't know his political allegiance, etc., don't care either. What I do know is that the government is throwing him under the bus to protect the political directorate that has responsibility to ensure that a proper audit is done, etc. Remember, this is an audit report that has been there for years. It is when Stabrook News, I think, put it out there and the opposition started to engage that the government actually acknowledged its existence, and therefore they knew full well what was in the report. And to come now and to tell us some public servant named Gosai is responsible is ridiculous. It's an attempt to hide the corruption. It is an attempt by Barra Jackdeo to protect himself and the government at the expense of a public servant who, because he would want his job, will not be able to come out and say, this is not true. All the evidence suggests that this is political machinations and not the error of a public servant.
And leader, before you go to the other part, the system, the public service system, Mr. Gosai could not have operated in isolation. He had to be given directive, and he would have had to be, it would have had to be the knowledge of the permanent secretary that all of this is happening. And when you look at the Ministry of Natural Resources press statement, sometimes I wonder if these people believe we are so gullible as Guyanese. It is like with the same blackout thing. 3 years after the PPP, blame the coalition. And for the 5 years the coalition has been there, blackout was very, very limited. It sometimes bothers me that these people may think that Guyanese people are so gullible into believing their stupidity. Vikram Bharat said in his press statement that the position of the government of Guyana today remains consistent with its original position, that the only authority to make a final determination in the Guyana is the Guyana Revenue Authority.
No.
So if the Guyana Revenue Authority is the final body to make a pronouncement on the issue, why was Bharat Jagdeo and Vikram Bharat engaged in a meeting with Mr. Gosai? Because that is what Vikram said here. He said in a meeting with the Vice President and I, reported that Mr. Gosai reported that the initial sum was reduced to US dollars 11,497,140, then further down to 3,414,853.68 US dollar. So Vikram and Bharat, both Bharats, they knew what was happening at the level at the Ministry of Natural Resources. If you knew, as you claim, that GRA has the final pronouncement, why is it that you were not engaging GRA?
And why is it you're blaming Gosai?
It is so shameful to know that the powers that be are taking it out on a public servant, a hard-working, tax-paying public servant. And the trend in this country is that the young man will have to either be quiet, or if he's bold enough to speak out, he will speak out and expose them for what they are.
And loses his job. On the other issue, GPL, as I understand it, under the APNU, AFC, had a clear plan, and based on the projection, I think it would have been up to 221.7 megawatts, rather than the 180 that exists now. As I understand it, they need about like 190. Let's put it at 200. Even if we put it there, they would have been adequate generating capacity to serve the entire society, including the big businesses on the grid. In my opinion, it is incompetence on the part of the government. It is the corruption at GPL that those two things are causing us problems. And the government's attempt to say they will take them off of the grid is a manifestation of that incompetence. And they are now forcing the private sector to pay for their incompetence. And that is why in my presentation, I called out the Private Sector Commission, the Georgetown Chambers of Commerce, all of them, because here you're seeing glaringly the incompetence of the government, but you are prepared to sit quiet and accept a stupid explanation from Barra Jackdale that no power was added under the APNU AFC when you know power was added. My understanding is you now taking the power we had put in Region 2 and you bringing that generation capacity to town. And what that will do, as I understand it, or if you have other means of redirecting it, is that you are now putting Region 2 in blackouts. So here the government is responsible. Their incompetence is manifest. I want to also make the point that I think this was made by Patterson. When we were in government, we did all this generating of capacity without a loan. The government is now borrowing and you're heading to blackout. You are experiencing blackout. It means it is incompetence on the part of the government. And I have long said at press conferences, when you raise these issues, Barra Jackdale doesn't address the issue. I gather, yes, they take off abusing APNU, AFC MPs. Mr. Jackdale, abusing people don't solve problem. It only exposes your weakness. It only exposes the incompetence of your government, and it exposes your incompetence. And it has also established what we have been saying over the years. You have not one successful project to your name as president. In Guyanese parlance, he's a pomposetto. This pomposetto should be held accountable by the Private Sector Commission for what he's doing.
And we must add that Mr. Lucas wrote a very informative letter and it's in the public domain, and I will encourage people to take a read of that letter. And he did say that it is important to point out that the Electricity Sector Reform Act and GPL's license require that it produce a 5-year development and expansion plan. This plan must be adjusted annually on a rolling basis. The plan is a tool for action, measuring performance and holding GPL accountable for the delivery of service promised to the people of this country. And it went on to show that the APNU AFC, in their tenure at office, had those plans in place. And the short-term proposal of the plan at the time included the installation of 46.5 megawatts of power in 2020 and 55.2 megawatts in 2021, positioning GPL to add 101.7 megawatts from new investments by 2021. The medium-term proposal included installation of an additional 120 megawatts of power starting in 2022, which meant that by 2023, Guyana would have had 221.7 megawatts of generating capacity from new investments and not the 180 megawatts that the government is now presiding over. The full implementation of our plan would have added an additional 180 megawatts of power starting in 2025 and bringing the total new investment to 424 megawatts no later than 2026. It is a very informative letter, and I implore that people take a read and they will see that the People's Progressive Party is doing nothing else but distracting from the real issue and pivoting from what is really affecting the Guyanese people here in 2023 in an attempt to say it is the APNU AFC. But the facts are real and the facts are out there, and people must engage and be informed and keep abreast to know that the real people who are trying to bamboozle them are squatting in office.
And if Barra Jackdale would stop focusing on where Patterson urinate and look at the plans that Patterson would have left to improve electricity, he would have been in a better position. But these things are way above this incompetent chap.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask two follow-up questions very quickly in response to what you said about the issues I raised. Sir, what measures would you suggest we put in place going forward in relation to the audit? And sir, do you believe there's enough transparency in that process? Finally, on the energy issue, there's a damning report out on the gas to energy project, which highlights, among other things, that GPL has been overstating the demand forecast for electricity. Has your party conducted any analysis, or do you agree that these power projects will leave Ghana with more electricity than the country should be paying for?
In fact, I read it 4-day morning, and I am in no position to comment in the way I like to comment, because I will ask our group responsible to do the analysis, and then we'll get back to you. There was another part of the question you asked.
Audit.
Oh, what we take.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you would recall that we, in I think 2 press conferences ago, identified the things we need to do, including a timeline for the audit with some amount of flexibility. We did say that. We did say I think the government should be obligated to, 1, undertake it, 2, within a timeline, and 3, to make it public. I also recall there are other elements of the proposal we made. I can get them up again and circulate them. But we did deal with this issue before.
And we have to strengthen the audit department at GRA, because the Commissioner General is on record saying that he is understaffed when it comes to that particular audit section at GRA there for the petroleum activities. So there must be greater focus in strengthening that department and ensuring that we have the capacity to handle the audits.
We also said in that presentation that you have to pay them competitive salaries, or there's no sense in complaining you're losing them to ExxonMobil when you are not paying competitive salaries. We also said that goal seems to be goalless. We need a structured program in which we estimate the needs, not only in terms of auditing, but all elements of the sector. And then we structure our training to get those persons trained so that we develop the capacity. But the things we are talking about will reduce corruption. The PPP's interest is corruption. And so to do the things we are saying, they will be antithetical to the interests of the People's Progressive Party. But we have outlined clear areas that need to be addressed to deal with this question of the audit. And we have consistently said, because this is a profit-sharing agreement, that audit has to be a key element, improving the capacity of the audit department to audit these accounts. We even spoke to other mechanisms to actually monitor production and the sale of oil, etc. It has to be a comprehensive approach, but a comprehensive approach will preclude this government from being involved in corrupt activities.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Dennis Chubra.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Norton, can you say, beyond the observations you've made about the problems that the Ministry of Natural Resources and the audit process, beyond that, what your opposition coalition plans to do either legally or at the parliamentary level with respect to this matter?
Well, again, it's just outline what we intend, some of the things we intend to do at the parliamentary level. As it relates to the legal element, on these matters, we ask our lawyers to look into it, and they will advise us in which direction we'll go. I remember you asking the question earlier about what we will do about taking and his appointment. And I did say at the time, our lawyers were studying it. And once they arrive at a sound legal position, we will be guided. Mind you, these are not things that are done by Norton or by my Paul. It has to go to competent professional people. We get the advice and then we take it from there. We believe generally the government has no interest in planning. If you go back, we have a census done in 2022. The government refuses up until now to release the census information, while the census information is already there. And my understanding is that the government doesn't like how it looks. When we were in government, we were doing the quarterly labor survey. Since the last one in 2019, this government has done none because they are afraid of statistics and information out there that will counter what they're doing. So all I would say to you, we will continue to do the work, and once we arrive at whether we go in the legal direction, we know we are going in the parliamentary direction. Once we decide if we're going in the legal direction or extra parliamentary, we will let you know.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
May
I go ahead?
first?
Yeah, you can go ahead and then I'll read a question from Mr. Mark Benchcock.
All right. Mr. Naipaul, in your statement, you spoke about vehicles being missing from the local government fleet. How could these vehicles go missing? And I'm sure if they disappear, they have to be registered, certified at the end of the year or registered or something. They got to be reported. How long ago have they been missing? And how many vehicles are missing?
Well, let me tell you that, any good person that is responsible for holding a ministry and the actions of the ministers in check would have information coming to him or her. And in this case, I have credible information that there are vehicles missing from the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development's fleet. And I am awaiting the registration number of those vehicles. I can say to you that I have a fair idea and a description of some of the vehicles and what they were used for. But subsequently, I will release a statement to that effect as I continue to gather the information. But I do believe that it is necessary for the public to know that that is a complaint or that is a concern that was raised with me by persons who are very closely aligned to what is happening at the ministry. That's all I wish to say on it at this point in time, Adam, and I will speak out more on it as I acquire more information relative to the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mark Benchcock, I see you're in.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to know, with all the skullduggery that's happening and the exposure of the PPP, with all of the skullduggery from hundreds of millions of dollars missing, fraudulent contracts to their friends and cronies, what approach the opposition has with regards to filing private criminal charges against the PPP and their opponent, their individuals who are alleged to be involved in these criminal activities, such as the missing $214 million money from the oil revenue, and also the awarding of questionable contracts to individuals who are incompetent to carry out the work. I say this because a lot of people are of the view that the PPP must be held accountable. They must be dragged before the court with even private criminal charges against them.
Okay. Now, the first task of the opposition is to expose. We are exposing. We also have to agitate, which we are doing. we have considered private criminal charges, but we are aware of the law. And under the law, you would have seen whenever private criminal charges are brought, the Director of Public Prosecution is directed to withdraw them. So we are likely to bring it, but we are also looking at some other options. Some people are talking to us about class action, both abroad especially with those linked with the oil and gas sector because it involves an American company. So there are a number of options we are looking at. But we also are educating, raising the consciousness of people and sensitizing them so that they can be involved in some extra parliamentary activities at the right time.
And if I may add to that, we did outline that at the parliamentary level, we will seek to table amendments to the Procurement Act, especially to have opposition representatives sitting at the level of the Procurement Board, both at the regional and national level. That is not just going to be beneficial to us as opposition members, but it will also be beneficial to the PPP, who will soon be in opposition. So it is not a case where we are looking to just fix the system now. We want a system that is going to be beneficial to the people of Guyana. So regardless of who sits in government, the checks and balance, the oversight, the ability to acquire information and have that extra eye from the opposite side must be there for the benefit of the Guyanese people. You know, when I raised this before with Ms. Gail Teixeira, sometime in the parliament, she said, well, when you guys were in power, it was like that. But when we were in power, we were awarding to the lowest, most responsive. The point I'm making is that it doesn't matter what happened in 2015, 2020, or 2011, or 2010, or 2009. What matters is that we have to, as leaders of this country, recognize that there are issues within the system that the People's Progressive Party is capitalizing on. And as I have said umpteen times, they keep meandering their way through the loopholes of the law. And we have to correct that for the present generation and the future generation. We cannot look at the past we cannot look at the past and practice that still. If there is an issue, clearly the procurement laws of this country require amendments. We have billions of dollars that are passing through the procurement system, and there are clear evidence to support that it is passing through in measures and means that cannot be transparent and accountable. And it is not following what is documented there in the Procurement Act. And fixing it requires us at the parliamentary level to be mature enough to amend the Procurement Act, make it more, give it a better oversight so that people can have trust in the system. That's the only way the system will work. And we will also be moving a motion in the National Assembly calling for a commission of inquiry into the operations of the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board and the Regional Procurement and Tender Administration Boards. But the best solution and the guaranteed solution to remove the corruption, to remove the malpractices, to remove what is happening in this country at this present time with our resource is to simply vote the PPP out of office at the next election. And that is what the Guyanese people will have to do. Thank you.
I have a quick follow-up here, and this is directed to the leader of the opposition as it pertains to the hypocrisy of Irfan Ali, who doesn't want to engage the opposition leader with matters that are of national interest. For example, the appointments of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor of the Judiciary. But yet, Mr. Ali saw it fit to hurriedly pick the phone up to call you just so that he can get some sort of public relations stunt regarding the situation with Venezuela. Why is it that thus far, Mr. Ali has not confirmed those two positions mentioned and other positions, but yet he wants to talk to you about Venezuela. Days after he spoke to you about Venezuela, we see boatloads of Venezuelan nationals coming into Guyana and are given special treatment compared to how the Haitians have been treated. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Norton?
Now, let me say at the outset that the first responsibility of all of us is to protect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Guyana. And for me, that is non-negotiable. You have to first protect Guyana to be able to govern and manage Guyana. And it is on that basis when the president engaged me, I said to him in no uncertain terms, we will be united on this question of the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. May I point out to you that the roughest period we had to deal with in terms of our territorial controversy is independence between 1966 and 1970. In that period, the PNC put in place the architecture and infrastructure for a strong foreign policy position. And so in large measure, a lot of what is happening in Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy is based on the foundation we would have laid. You might have had a case or two where I think Dr. Jagan and at one time Barra Jagdeo were talking about negotiating to give peace here and peace there. I think they missed badly that the minute you start to give land, people become ambitious and want all. And so there should be no giving of our land. The arbitral award has settled it, and that's it. As it relates to the local situation, from the outset, I was prepared to engage based on the Constitution. I'm of the view that meaningful consultation is more than just the president sending you the CV of people and ask your views on it. And then he goes ahead and make the decision regardless of your objections. And so we have to test this question of meaningful consultation. In the constitutional reform process, the PPP was very opposed to the old form of consultation and had appeared to be supportive of meaningful consultation. But in government, they have not shown a willingness to meaningfully consult. I am aware that the PPP has a plot, and the main plot is to control the judiciary, and his refusal to appoint the president too is part of that plot. We have to be vigilant. Fortunately, the Constitution states agreement, and therefore this is one of the areas they cannot do arbitrarily on their own, and so they are on their back foot with that. And he was given a fait accompli when I put out into the public domain that I agree for these two persons to be appointed, and he has been dodging that. And then nonsensically and antithetical to the Constitution, he said it will be dealt with by the Judicial Service Commission. The Judicial Service Commission has nothing to do with the appointment of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice. It's clearly a case of the leader of the opposition and the president. So a lot of that is hogwash. It is evident that the PPP discriminates against Haitians. From the time they came into power, Haiti, there's supposed to be free movement of which Haiti is a part. The government very early in this period removed that and has banned virtually Haitians from coming here while allowing others to come. I am told that if you go to some of the hospitals right now, you can't even understand the people who are talking. So it can't be based on language. Then you seem to be, I understand that the International Migration Organization and the conventions on migration demand that in Venezuela's present situation, we facilitate migrants. But we have got to be sensible. I said in a program recently, the government seems only interested in trying to get Venezuelans to register to vote, because as I understand it, they don't want to release the census because the traditional support-based numbers would have declined. And they are trying their best now to get Venezuelans and others to
Prop it up.
prop it up. And so the issue here, again, they don't like it when you say it, it's racism. They make the assumption that Haitians will vote for us or be supportive of us, but the others that they are fighting with, they will be able to get their support. The reality is none of them, regardless whether they are Haitians, etc., unless they go through the process, follow the law, should be allowed to vote in our elections. But we are constantly discovering the issuance of birth certificates. Remember, we had strict measures for birth certificate. The government changed the law so that any Tom, Dick, or Harry Lal could issue birth certificates so that they can prop up the system. So what the government is doing is destroying all the institutions in the country to achieve their narrow political objectives. The Haitian issue is one in which the government believes it cannot control the Haitians. They are African by origin, and therefore they are preventing them from coming in to Guyana. They are doing the same with Nigerians. But I want you to note, they have an activist in the Rupununi. When he sends and recommends Haitians, they are allowed to come, pass through, go to the Rupununi and on to Brazil, and the PPP elite corrupt core benefits. So they are anti-Haitian staying in Guyana. But to facilitate the cronyism and the corruption of their people, they are prepared to grant those who are willing to go on to Brazil, etc. And then you see the incompetence in the Guyana police force. When you see in the government, when you see on the side of a vehicle, police here, which sensible person, which sensible Guyanese, in which you have a controversy with Venezuela, would find it useful to put in Spanish police on the vehicle? And if perchance you were pursuing foreign policy objective, one of the greatest supporters, or there's a confluence of interest, is Guyana and Brazil. But you didn't put Portuguese, you put Spanish. A lot of it is to promote a narrow partisan political interest. And I want it to be made very clear. We are supporting the government of Guyana on the Venezuela-Guyana territorial controversy. We believe the arbitral award of 1899 is valid, and Venezuela cannot provide any proof to the contrary. We support them there. But it should not be mistaken to believe that that extends to support to the domestic policies of the government. The government is in crisis. We have just identified to you a few areas that are in crisis. I come to youth and sport where they're stockpiling a lot of vehicles. There's another story by itself. We will get there. But the marked incompetence of the ministers in this government, that incompetence is affecting our people. The resources from oil and gas are not getting to our people. And life under the PPP now is worse than under the APNU AFC, even though we did not have the resources from oil and gas. I believe the PPP is in a crisis. Jagdeo is going mad. And we will continue to pile on the pressure so that the madness can continue in his head.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can, to the moderator, be permitted for one final question?
Yes, one final, and then I'll take
Yeah.
one other.
The final question I have, has a B to it, a B part. The A part goes to Mr. Norton. With the serious allegations of corruption that was leveled against Mara Jagdeo by Sue seem to have disappeared. We are hearing that Sue is actually in Guyana, and nothing is coming out of that serious allegation that is leveled against Barrett Jack Deal. No action on the part of the opposition to confront Jack Deal legally with private criminal charges, or to force SOCU to make a decision to either arrest and question Barrett Jack Deal on those serious corruption allegations. And the next part of the final question is for Mr. Manny Paul. Hopefully, there is a false commission of inquiry that is going on concerning the Madia fire. You, Mr. Manny Paul, is the shadow minister of local government. I'd like your take on that, and whether you were invited to give any sort of evidence.
Okay, let me deal with the first question. It is one thing to talk about private criminal charges, and how effective it will be is another question. We have consistently called for the police to investigate and bring charges against Barrett Jack Deal. You are aware that the police commissioner is a poodle of the PPP, and therefore the police is not going to act. You just have to see how the police operate and create the conditions to let Dharamlal go his way. And you will understand that you're beating a dead horse. I'm not into beating a dead horse. We are told, and I just said, that there is a possibility, and I've asked lawyers to look at it, that we can bring some charges or have them brought in the United States, what is called a class action. We have lawyers looking at it. I myself, with my little legal understanding, will look at it. But I do not want to pronounce and say we will do X, Y, and Z until I understand all the elements of it. But we will continue to keep them accountable. I don't think it is true to say it has died. Virtually every press statement, every engagement we have made, we have consistently called for that investigation and for Barrett Jack Deal to face the brunt of the law. In fact, one of the things I think upset him is that the diaspora conference calling for sanctions to be made, to be taken against him. We will pursue as much options as possible to ensure that Barrett Jack Deal pays for the wrong he's doing to the people of Guyana.
To answer your second part, Mark, let me start by first saying that it was the opposition through the National Assembly that first called for a COI into the Madia fire. We submitted a motion to the National Assembly. To date, we have not heard back about that motion. The last I know is that it was on the desk of the Speaker, and I guess it is still there. And our position was that we needed a COI with competent international and national commissioners to ascertain more than what this commission that the PPP put together is seeking to achieve. I think the Guyanese people are sensible enough to know that the COI that is currently being conducted by the People's Progressive Party is nothing but a waste of taxpayers' money, because what they are seeking to do is nothing in terms of informing this nation as to how we should go forward. The nation must never forget that before this fire, there were 2 reports that were sent to the government of Guyana, one from UNICEF and the other from the Guyana Fire Service. They must never, we, the Guyanese people, must never forget that the government had in their possession 2 reports that condemned this building and condemned how it was built, and it was a risk to the lives of those children that unfortunately lost their lives. We must never forget that. And I believe strongly, as I have said before, that the People's Progressive Party is responsible for the deaths of those 20 babies. I know of UNICEF report, and I know that it was at cabinet in the People's Progressive Party hands. I know that the Minister of Finance was supposed to provide the funding to the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, the Regional Administration of Region Number 8, for them to do the work, to make the corrective measure, to take the corrective measures. I know of the Guyana Fire Service, and the public knows this too, because those reports are out there. Subsequently, another motion was put in the National Assembly where the Speaker disqualified it because he knew that the PPP was going down to a COI. But what will concern me, Mark, going forward, is to know how much money they are paying these commissioners for this work that they're doing here. I remind you that we are still awaiting answers as it relates to the remuneration of the commissioners on the Commission of Inquiry into this hogwash 2020 election COI that they had. I presented to this nation information that I had which suggests that it was a $700 million Commission of Inquiry sometime last year. Anil Nandalal is on record saying that that is not so, but yet he has not produced any information to this nation with reference to the salaries and other benefits of the commissioners and other staff members of that COI in 2020 elections. And look how long that has been over. So we're still awaiting on that information. But Mark, we will continue at the level of our parliament, and we will continue to inform the people of Guyana, because as I said before, it comes down to the people of Guyana making that sensible choice and recognizing that 2015 to 2020, we were in a far better place as a country. We were in a far better place in terms of law and order. We were in a far better place in terms of our institutions and our structures to govern for a better life for all. Where we are today is frightening for the future.
May I add that you raise buildings? The Minister of Education said in the Parliament that they have no plan to put air condition in schools. But one of the dumbest things happening, they are going ahead building schools without proper ventilation. The minister stood in front of East Rheinveld and opened a school that has little or no ventilation or proper furniture. Now, if you recognize that this place is getting hotter and hotter, then one of the things I think you need to do is call in your architects, your engineers, and let them design schools for the present situation. Then they have another stupidness that they're doing. They're building schools in which most of the day the children are in the sun because how they are positioned, it is in the south and the west. Now I know you just put solar panel in the west and the south because you can get plenty sun, but you put in our children there. It is marked incompetence. The St. Gabriel school that they built, they look like their intention is to cook children because there is no scope for ventilation there. And you're not only seeing the incompetence there, you're seeing it in infrastructure. As they build roads, they are destroying the roads that they built, that were built before. If you go through places like Providence, Diamond, all you see in farm. Well, I won't comment on Parfait yet. I'm going there shortly. But if you say that, I believe you. But I'm telling you, the ones I have been to, all you are doing is destroying. Of course, it suits them because they're going to give their cronies another contract and they will make money. But at the same time, they are squandering the resources of our country. And APNU AFC government will have engineers and architects look over our building structures and prepare them in a way that suits an emerging climate change situation. The government cannot continue to speak about climate change, but everything they're doing It does not take into consideration climate change. It is just incompetence. And that is where we are. And that is why we concluded in this press conference and sought to bring to your attention the crisis across the country. Buildings and construction, we will deal with it as we move forward.
I'll take my final question from Mr. Antonio D.
Okay, good afternoon, members of the press, and good afternoon, Mr. Norton. I have a question directed to you, sir. Are you inferring, based on the signs on the vehicles, the police vehicles, is it a missed signal that the government is sending to the country, a counterpart? Because concerning the fact that we have this ongoing foreign controversy, do you think that it is sending them a signal?
Well, let us go back. The government claim, at least the PR people, stupidly claim that it's to accommodate the diversity. Now, it makes no common sense. If you're accommodating diversity, you got to put French. You got to put Portuguese. You got to put all the languages. Now, where in the world?
Chinese.
Yeah, well, you got to put Chinese. And we got the Amerindian community. Now, it's a manifestation of the incompetence of the Home Affairs Minister and the stupidity of the police commissioner. Let's assume the commissioner was directed to do that by the minister. It is his task as a professional to say, this is not what should happen. We are not as diverse as the United States of America, but I have never seen German, Russian, French on those vehicles. It's a stupid decision that should be changed. It doesn't only send mixed signals, it signals the incompetence of the government. It signals a lack of responsiveness to the issues involved in the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. But you know, the government, they don't like pull back when they make mistakes. And additionally, I am 99.9% sure that apart from whatever instructions, it would have emanated from one of the close people who produce these markings. They pay a couple billion. He or she produces policia, and then they just slap it on. They get paid without any concern for this nation. That is my position on this.
And we must, leader, we must also take note of the fact that these private vehicles that are dominating our roadways with the red and blue lights continue to be a hazard to road users, and it continues to create mayhem on the public roads. And that is something that the commissioner should be focusing on, but instead he unfortunately kept David Patterson's name on the no-fly list and then want us to believe that it was a mistake. I said in the US, and I'm saying again, the best apology Hickins can give us is his resignation. Thank you.
All right. At this time, I will allow MP Coretta MacDonald to make a statement. But in addition to what the leader and the Ganesh just spoke about the police force, I need to bring to your attention to, and this is something that the Commissioner of Police and Ropes and Bend should be looking at. Stop having your police officers in the corners of streets and in bus sheds, and then you run out to push your guns in front of vehicles. Stop doing it. It's not right and it's dangerous. Please advise your traffic officers that they should not be ducking around in bus sheds and in little streets and then pushing out their guns, running to the road and pushing out their guns at motorists when they're on the streets. Outside of that, I just wanted to say to you, members of the media, that the government has displayed again its arrogance, its incompetence, and fear for the Guyana Teachers Union, hence their reason for consulting, as they claim, with 100 teachers as against consulting with the Guyana Teachers Union. And I want to make this clear. The 100 teachers who were selected and they had their prop meetings with, they don't speak on behalf of the Guyana Teachers Union. I just wanted to make that clear.
Neither could they speak on behalf of the teachers, because I don't know that they would have had any consultation with the teachers. They were prepared and prompted to push the government agenda, and that is ridiculous.
And just to make it clear, the fact that, and let me share this one, in Region 1, Subdistrict Maruka, in that area, we saw the picture with 4 teachers who were representing that sub-region. And all 4 of those teachers, and I can say this, the first teacher, she is the sister of former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Karen Rodriguez. The next teacher, Anthony Harris, he is the brother of the RO who had all the electoral documents missing, and what wasn't missing was wet. The other teacher, it is alleged that she is a child mother of Ganga Pasal. The other teacher who was there, and I'm not going to call their names, he is the son-in-law of Mr. D'Souza. So those 4 teachers were representing Region 1. Even the schools that they came from, those teachers did not know that these teachers were selected to represent them. They had no consultations with even the members of their staff. So I don't understand how they were speaking for the teachers. And for they had teachers who spoke about the increase in allowances. Let me say this. Of course, we feel sorry and we pity them because they were given scripts. But let me make it clear. Allowances and increased allowances, they don't add anything to a teacher's salary. As a matter of fact, that act of putting a teacher to read from a script to talk about increased allowances, it's wicked and devious. Because 1, you're not catering for the masses of teachers, because all teachers will not receive those allowances. Secondly, like I said before, it does not add up to your tabulation when you're going to computate for pension and gratuity. And thirdly, they are showing total disrespect for those teachers who would have served this country, who were dedicated to serving this country in the education sector and have retired now. They show no respect for them because allowances will not increase their pension that they're receiving. So the whole act in itself is a wicked and deceitful one. Thank you. At this time, I wish to thank the members of the media for joining today's press conference, and all our viewers. Do have a wonderful afternoon.
Recording stopped.